The 911 dispatcher remembered the voice clearly. Male, calm, but trembling just enough to make her uneasy. You need to go to 112 Cypress Lane, he said. They'll never forget what they did. Click. That was 3:17 a.m., October 9th, 1998. When officers entered the Wilmont house 15 minutes later, the smell hit first. Coppery, heavy, unmistakable. Two bodies, David and Marjorie Wilmont, a respected retired principal and his wife, found lifeless in their pristine suburban home. No sign of a break-in, no robbery, but there it was, scrawled across the living room wall in what lab tests later confirmed was human blood. Never forget. That phrase would become a legend in Hollow Creek. And over the next 2 decades, it would unravel a story so dark, so deeply buried, that some people still refuse to talk about it. To anyone looking from the outside, the Wilmonts had it all. A beautiful 2-story colonial home, well-kept lawn, a reputation for community service. David was the retired principal of Eastbrook High, beloved by parents, feared by troublemakers. Marjorie taught Sunday school. Their only daughter, Emily, was the kind of child small towns took pride in. Straight A student, piano prodigy, quiet, polite. But under the surface, something was wrong. Neighbors later recalled the house being too quiet. One described how she'd see David sitting alone in his car late at night, staring at the school building down the street. Another swore she'd heard screaming coming from the basement years before the murders, though no one ever called the police. The Wilmonts, people said, kept to themselves. When Detective Laura Finch arrived, she knew immediately this wasn't a random act of violence. Every photo frame in the house had been turned face down. Every clock, even the old grandfather clock in the foyer, had stopped at 11:47 p.m. There were no footprints, no force locks, nothing missing, just 2 bodies. David in his armchair, a deep wound to the head. Marjorie collapsed near the doorway as if trying to run. And the wall, never forget, written in blood. Tests confirmed it was David's, but the handwriting didn't match his or Marjorie's or their daughter's. Someone else had been there. Investigators soon found a strange link to the past. In an old filing cabinet in David's office, they discovered a folder marked H. Lockwood Incident. Inside were typewritten notes from 1974. The file described a student, Henry Lockwood, who had fallen to his death in the Eastbrook High basement after hours. It was ruled an accident, but several students from that era told police otherwise. Henry was bullied relentlessly by students and teachers. Rumors swirled that Principal Wilmont had punished Henry harshly for exposing a cheating scandal among the staff. Days later, Henry was dead. His brother, Thomas Lockwood, disappeared soon after the funeral. The Wilmonts moved towns the following year. No one connected the dots until that night in 1998. Detectives traced the 911 call to a payphone at a diner 15 miles from Hollow Creek. No fingerprints, no footage, but the phone's receiver had a partial print, too smudged to identify. However, security footage from a nearby gas station showed a man in a dark coat, hat pulled low, using the diner's phone minutes before police were dispatched. He fit the age profile of Thomas Lockwood, Henry's missing brother. The problem? Thomas Lockwood had been declared legally dead 7 years earlier. So, if not him, who was that man? 3 days later, detectives found partially burned items in the Wilmont's fireplace. A school yearbook from 1974. A group photo of Eastbrook High faculty, David Wilmont, standing beside a young Henry Lockwood. And on the back of that photo, in red marker, "We watched him fall. Then we walked away." The handwriting matched the blood message on the wall. The ink, same composition. But there was one more thing. A smudge of lipstick on the photo's edge. The same brand and shade Marjorie used daily. It looked like someone had been trying to destroy the evidence and failed. Emily Wilmont, 26 at the time, was tracked down in Denver, where she worked as a nurse. When told her parents were dead, she reportedly froze, not in shock, but in what Detective Finch described as pure dread. She told police something she'd never said before. "When I was little, I'd wake up to someone tapping on my window whispering, 'Never forget.' I thought it was a dream. Emily claimed she'd left home because she couldn't stand the atmosphere in that house. The secrets, the arguments, the guilt that hung in the air. When asked if she knew a man named Thomas Lockwood, her face went pale. "My father said he was crazy," she said softly. "He used to send us letters. They all said the same thing. You can't bury memory." Those letters were never found. 2 decades later, in 2018, new homeowners were renovating the old Wilmont place when they made a shocking discovery. Behind the basement wall, the same place neighbors had once heard screaming, they found a small wooden box. Inside, a rusted nameplate that read H. Lockwood, a folded page torn from a Bible, Psalm 109, and a bloodstained note. "Now you'll remember him forever." The blood matched Emily Wilmont. When detectives confronted her, Emily confessed to being at the house that night. She had returned to confront her parents after discovering an old newspaper about Henry's death. She admitted to writing "Never forget," but insisted she didn't kill them. She claimed she blacked out after a violent argument, and when she woke up, her parents were dead, and she saw a man standing in the hallway before he vanished. Was it Thomas Lockwood, or guilt manifesting as a hallucination? Years later, in 2021, a genealogical DNA database revealed something incredible. The blood sample from a fireplace matched a living relative of Henry and Thomas Lockwood, a man named Tommy Harlow, who had spent years in mental institutions under false identities. When detectives located his records, they learned he had died in 2002. His personal effects included a tattered journal filled with rambling entries. The final page read, "They tried to forget him, but I remembered for both of us." And below that, one last line, "The house remembers too. Since then, 112 Cypress Lane has been sold 6 times. Every new owner reports strange occurrences. Clocks stopping at 11:47, faint knocking sounds, even the words 'never forget' appearing in condensation on mirrors." The last owner, a contractor named Joe Hanley, swore he found those words carved into the baseboards under layers of new paint. He moved out within 3 months. Local children avoid walking past the property, and every Halloween, someone leaves a single red rose on the porch and disappears before anyone can see who it is. Detective Finch, now retired, still believes Emily was not alone that night. Her theory? Emily confronted her parents. Things turned violent, but someone else entered the house. Someone who had been watching, waiting, and finally decided that night was justice's due. Others believe Thomas Lockwood never died, that he came back, made his message clear, and vanished once he'd avenged his brother. And then some whisper the strangest theory of all, that the house itself, the walls, the floors, the air, carries the memory of what happened in 1974, that it forces anyone who enters to remember. Question to viewers. So what do you believe? Was this the work of a vengeful spirit, a survivor's guilt, or a killer returning from the grave to finish what started decades ago? Or is the truth far simpler and far darker than anyone has ever dared to admit? Because one thing remains certain, every time someone paints over those words, they always come back.